true. And we're live. Hello.
Hopefully we're live.
Hopefully we're live. There we go.
We are live at Epiphan.
It is Thursday at 3 p.m. and we are coming to you live, and we are here to talk to you today about live event streaming.
Yeah, live event streaming. So, I mean, obviously this is something we talk about quite a bit, but I feel like a very emerging trend right now as we speak. Some of you, of course, I'm sure are well aware of coronavirus, COVID-19, depending on what you want to call it, and its impact on global economies, as well as what it's doing to live events.
You're seeing a lot of events get postponed or just canceled entirely and go totally online. There was Google's I/O conference, that's been moved to an online conference.
Facebook F8
right.
has been canceled and moved to an online conference. And there's been others that have just been outright canceled, like GDC, Global Game Development Conference. Even the EVE Online annual thing in Iceland's been canceled.
Wow.
So there's been a lot of things like that. And obviously Mobile World Congress was canceled a couple weeks ago. So there's been a lot of things. And so far, things like NAB are still go. We still plan on being there for now, unless something happens and the whole thing ends up canceled.
But the underline for this is essentially for some of these trade shows, especially for medium or smaller companies, it's a great opportunity to get their products out there, go face-to-face with some of the other businesses that they regularly interact with. And without that opportunity to do it in person, they're really turning to live event streaming to try and get that same opportunity. And I mean, there are a lot of companies, of course, who maybe are experienced doing pre-recorded video content, but maybe not as familiar with streaming that sort of content live for maybe a tech demo or something like that.
Exactly. So we were actually planning this episode before any of this happened. This has been on the calendar for quite a while. We wanted to talk about it anyways. It just seemed to coincidentally seem particularly relevant, as I think we're going to see a lot of companies, as you mentioned, that don't traditionally do this, all of a sudden finding themselves in a pinch with a week or 2 weeks before what should have been a major event. Surprise! And the boss comes and says, hey, you, figure it out.
And you may just be, you've just been doing pre-recorded video content. Maybe you're the company photographer or social media manager.
Maybe you're none of those. Maybe you're the IT guy.
And you're going to have to figure it out, because when the boss says, I need you to do this, usually the only answer they're looking for is, yeah, I can do that.
Exactly. So, especially in a pinch. So we wanted to cover a bunch of possible things to look at, things to consider, and all the variations of what you might need in a pinch.
Yeah.
Run what you brung, whatever you want to call it, to hopefully be as successful as you possibly can with minimal setup. Yeah. Like, we're not going to go into too much detail about hanging lights or stuff like that. So if we can just go to the 2-up, we've got a PowerPoint talking about sort of the scenario that we're laying out here. So it's a medium to large business, maybe a small business that wants to stream an event. It'll be at a hotel or a conference room, maybe even a video studio. Or a large boardroom. Maybe something that has 50 to 100 people in terms of a seating capacity, maybe a couple hundred, but somewhere in that ballpark.
And we're going to be looking at around maybe 2 speakers with a slideshow presentation. There you go. What a coincidence. And it has to be live, because that's where all the value is. So it might look a little something like that. Can we just go back to the main, and we'll talk about some of the stuff that you're going to need to get this sort of underway. Most importantly, of course, you're going to need something to actually record all this footage with, right?
Yeah, and again, if we're doing live, we don't want something that only records. So cameras play a big role in this, and of course we've done lots of episodes about variations of cameras. But if we're talking about minimal, we're talking about maybe finding what's in your back pocket, but maybe not quite literally, because as we've also talked about many times, it's probably not a good idea to run all of this off a smartphone. You want to be a little more polished, a little more professional than that. So we got to look at cameras.
So the big argument, I mean, before you get anywhere, is if you're not familiar with cameras, you may be thinking, oh God, do I need a camcorder? Should I be getting a DSLR or something? So we've got some nice little props here.
Yeah. So we're gonna start on this end. This is a prop we've used a lot. Canon G20, but we're standing in for the traditional Handycam.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with these cameras. There are low-end ones that can be very inexpensive. So if you have to buy something, that could be a possibility. Just again, make sure it fits your needs. I would say the downside to these in a minimal setup is that they aren't well suited for all environments and lighting conditions. In terms of maybe giving you the professional look. They can do really well if you have the time and a studio and the lighting and everything else, but they're going to look like your dad's video of the kids if you just throw it into any old environment. That might not be what you want.
The classic 2004 wedding video.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The other downside is that these are becoming less and less common that people actually already own, because dad's not shooting his kids with this anymore. They're using their smartphones, or they're buying more multi-purpose cameras, which is our next example.
We're going to be talking about DSLR styled cameras. Now, neither of these are actually DSLRs. They're interchangeable lens cameras.
Not to get too nitpicky and technical.
But the idea is, I mean, it's a photography camera that also has video capacity.
Right.
And these are really versatile because
extremely.
You can change the lenses, which means with something like a camcorder, to get your perfect shot, it's got to be at a specific location. Well, what if you can't actually set up the tripod there? Well, you just pop the lens off this and you switch it for something else.
Exactly.
And that does offer a lot of versatility. There are a few arguments in favor of mirrorless or DSLR style cameras like this. And I mean, versatility is one of them. Another one is some of them have really, really great 4K functionality if that's something that you're looking for. This one, the Lumix Panasonic G7, it shoots in 4K. And if your boss is saying, hey, we're a bleeding edge technology company, we want this stream to go out.
Max. Yeah, you might want that. And funny enough, you can buy a G7 on sale oftentimes with two lenses for about $500-600.
Yeah.
This G20, I would say, is the inferior camera and is $1,000.
Oh boy.
So, as a comparison. And definitely, if you step down to a $200 Handycam, you're not even coming close to what this can do or what that can do.
You're going to notice the difference. You do sort of get what you pay for at times.
Now, funny enough, though, you have two similar cameras.
I do. This is an Olympus OMD EM5. This is the Mark I, and this is what I use sometimes when I'm shooting on the weekends. I don't want to get a second shot or something like that. It's got a great stabilizer, but it does have a big drawback if you're doing this for live streaming that essentially makes it not usable for live streaming. And here
Tim
we go.
makes that point exactly. Tim saying a lot of DSLRs, and in that case, Tim, you're really talking about pure DSLRs. Our two examples on the table happen to be Micro Four Thirds. Mirrorless, if you're going this body style and you need video, mirrorless is the way to go. DSLRs, in the traditional sense, are a mirrored camera, and because of that, they have short run times. They're not designed for long video. They're great for doing little cuts, 5-10 minutes, and then you're going to edit it all together.
Often they have a built-in limit on the amount of time that they can actually shoot
mirror
for.
lifts or whatever the case is. They're not a great choice. So if you're someone like Tim's mentioning there, that has a Canon Rebel Series T2 whatever, not a good choice for this. I forgot to bring it, but my own Nikon D3200 that's several years old, I'm sure lots of people have that kind of stuff laying around. Same problem, not a good live output camera when it has a mirror. But even these two are different.
Even this one has a drawback because though it has a micro HDMI out, it doesn't actually let you play it back live. That's just essentially for playback later. And some cameras have odd functionality issues where you're not actually able to get a clean feed out. So you've got the GUI just plastered all over it. And that's functionally useless for you in this situation.
Yeah, but so although they look the same on the surface or very similar, the Panasonic is whether it's the G7, which is the older model now, G85 replaced it, and now the G95 as well.
And there's the GH5,
GH4. Those are a little higher end.
And those are more aimed at like vloggers, I think. But
well, they're more expensive, but they're great cameras. The other thing the Panasonic stand out in, and we'll kind of get into audio later, is it actually has an audio input on it that can go out of the HDMI. So if you're looking to unify and simplify things, that can be a big advantage.
But honestly, one of the biggest advantages for this type of camera is, as I said, you may have one kicking around that is perfectly suited for your needs. Or as I said, if you're the video guy or social media person at your company, you may already be using one for shooting still photography and not even aware that it's got a perfectly good live video functionality.
So one we've shot this show with many times, as I'm sure many of our repeat viewers will know, is the Sony a6300.
Yeah, it's a great little camera.
Tiny little camera, and I would point out the other thing about these style is that physically, this is smaller to transport.
Yes, and we've got an example of the small footprint on that Sony right here. George too and Cameron are on a shoot right now, and they got some Instagram requests about, I mean, what is this camera that they have on the slider over there, and we'll blow it up right there. Right there on the left, that's the Sony right there.
Exactly, and I mean they have it on a big multi-axis slider and head and all this stuff for remote control, which is awesome. But if you just had that on a basic tripod, it would be so minimal, and it's very easy to move.
It's easy to move. You can set it up essentially anywhere.
It's 4K. Anyway, so it's a great choice. You can even get the older versions, the A5000.
Yeah.
Very cheap. I saw one on Facebook Marketplace 3 days ago for $130.
Oh boy.
I mean, and it's an older, lower end model to the A6300, but is just as good at 1080p as what we're kind of talking about here. So, you know, even if you have to go buy something, if you're talking about getting a used G7 or a used Sony, you can be in a couple $100 only and be pretty well off, actually, doing a pretty good job.
Absolutely. So, but of course, the thing to remember is, like, do your research.
Is it live?
Yeah.
Is it clean? Do you need audio through the camera? And if you do, does it output audio?
And speaking of audio, that's the next thing we're going to talk about, because of course, if the stream's looking great, but they can't hear what your speakers are talking about, that's no good for anybody.
Exactly. You could do what we're doing right now and go with an overhead shotgun mic. Again, we normally don't do this anymore because it is less ideal. But in a pinch, you could get, and again, I forgot, part of my own personal kit is I have a shotgun mic that I can connect to my Nikon that is good for recording, but I could have hooked that up to your G7.
Absolutely.
And it could sit in the shoe, and we could have a shotgun on a G7 doing maybe an interview style shoot. We'd be done.
And the big advantage of that is, of course, you've just got the one feed coming out. It's a lot less complicated. But for something like, let's say your boss says, well, we're doing a product launch and I'm going to run across the stage and point all over the place. Yeah. What you're going to need in those really is a lav mic system.
Yeah. So going to a wireless lav, I think most people are going to be familiar with the pack and the little mic, and you clip it on. The base of these, many times, are just going to output 3.5 millimeter.
Yeah.
So you could actually, this is actually already equipped with it, put this in the shoe on the top of your camera, run it out into the camera, and you're done. If you need more of these, then you might need...
You're going to need something else.
A mixer. I wouldn't recommend this one for portability, but you can get much smaller 4-channel mixers that are about a quarter of the size of this.
Yes.
And that might be more practical. But if you go that route, then again, you can get those fairly inexpensive.
Yeah.
And it's going to give you a ton of flexibility.
Well, it unifies everything that you're doing, because you've got all these feeds. You've got video, maybe you've got a 2-cam setup, so now you've got 2 video feeds, you've got 2 speakers happening. You're going to have to unify all of this stuff, and with the mixer, it gives you one audio output at the other end that you can plug into whatever you're using to do your switching and your streaming, which is really what we specialize in, and what will end up being the brains of your live streaming operation. So if we could just go back to the, we're on the 2-shot, perfect. So switching and streaming will be one of your big concerns. And I mean, in the past, this was only really something that you would do in like a big control room, of course. Now, a lot of people use laptop computers for this, especially on the lower end if you're just getting started with a YouTube channel or something. But
if you need something very basic, doing it on a computer with software is definitely a possibility.
It's viable, but I mean...
Again, as we said off the top, if we're looking at a medium to a large business, chances are they have a little bit of budget to invest into this if they really care about making it as professional as possible. The downside, once we have multiple cameras, multiple audio sources, especially maybe coming from a mixer or some other pro audio gear, is that you might want a dedicated hardware encoder. And the Pearl Mini is an amazing choice to unify all of these pieces because of its flexibility, especially on the audio front.
Yeah.
Because we could do it with or without a mixer.
Yeah. Well, let's show. You can just turn it around, show them the I/O. You've got all sorts of options here, essentially. And I mean, of course, we have XLR and TRS in if you're working with pro audio, and
but mic or line level for those.
Exactly.
So if you have, like the wireless labs we normally use here, the receivers are just these tiny little sticks that plug directly into XLR.
Right.
You can use that directly into the Pearl Mini without anything else.
And of course, it's also got a 3.5 millimeter connector if
Which
you're
I could
using
run,
something like this.
I could run this lav pack directly into that. So yeah, there's a lot of possibilities there. And of course, always, you know, the Pearl also has up to 3 video inputs, 2 HDMI, 1 SDI. So depending on the cameras you're using, you might need to adapt one of them to SDI to leave one of the HDMI open for maybe your presentation share.
Yeah, get a little one of those converter dongles or what have you. And it just offers a great deal of functionality in really a small package.
Well, I think the other thing, and you know, I actually came across this very recently with some comments I was reading in some threads where someone was struggling with some setups in a computer software scenario. They were using OBS, for example. One of the drawbacks was they wanted to stream and record at the same time. Okay, no big deal. But they wanted to stream to multiple platforms. They had the bandwidth to do it themselves without using an external restreaming service. But OBS doesn't do that.
Yeah.
Not without some real complicated gymnastics.
Right.
Pearl can. So again, if we're talking about that medium, larger business, they probably have the bandwidth to do it.
And they want to reach as many people as they can.
So they want multiple platforms. They might want YouTube, Facebook, and Vimeo, and IBM Cloud Video, or whatever else they're using. They might want all of those at the same time. Because again, if we think about going back to the context of, I now have to virtually replace a trade show booth with an online stream.
Right.
It's got to be up here. It can't be down here.
You want to give everyone the full experience that they would get if they were there in person. So
Exactly. Yeah, Danny mentioned here, you know, you could also sort of expand out one of the ports of a Pearl Mini using another external switcher.
Yeah.
That's another possibility as well. But yeah, there's one of the reasons we wanted to focus on the Pearl Mini for today's topic is that this is something that, again, in the context of that medium business, is not terribly expensive. It is going to give them the professionalism they need. Doesn't add the super complex old school broadcast style stuff that just confuses a lot of people.
Yeah.
Once it's set up, you can control it all from the front touch screen. So you don't have to have a big control room or a lot of people around to run it.
You could be working one of these cameras during that live demo or that live event while also doing the switching.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. We've done it where we've run a live event and the person presenting just does their own control once it's been set up in advance.
Right.
It's possible. So yeah, that combined with, you know, you could easily set up a couple of cameras like this and a Pearl, a couple lavs, and that's all you'd need. And I think you could probably do a very professional job with that.
Now, it does require a lot of, well, perhaps not a lot of is the wrong term, but it does require some setup ahead of time.
Yeah, you don't want to do this in 24 hours.
Yeah, if this is going to be at a conference hall or at a hotel convention center or something like that, you're going to want to show up at least the day before so you can talk to the IT guys and figure out what's going on with the network.
Networking is always its own challenge and good times. I spend a lot of time talking to our customers who sometimes get trapped by networking. Definitely if you're going outside of your own controlled network, you're going outside your own space to a ballroom or a hotel or something like that, you need to consult with the IT teams in those locations to make sure that they understand what you're trying to do and that they're actually going to allow it. Many times the traffic, the ports you might need are blocked And so making sure they understand what you're actually doing. You're not just checking your email, you're running a live stream, and you're gonna need this to work. So making sure that that's established and understood ahead of time makes a big difference. The other thing, and you know, and Danny points this out in this comment here, you know, it helps with reliability as well.
Yes.
You know, software stuff is great. Some of the software is super powerful, but when you start to add a powerful computer to run it, the license for the software, if you're buying something like vMix or Wirecast, and multiple capture cards to get your multiple cameras,
and
this is probably cheaper.
You're just and in that situation, you're just sort of assuming that all those capture card drivers are going to play nice with each other, right? And that's
many moving pieces make a lot of problems. Actually, right while I was just eating my lunch right before the show, I was watching a YouTube video, someone talking about how to do a bunch of workarounds and fudge some multi-view stuff. And it involved 4 splitters and this multi-view box and cables running everywhere, power supplies everywhere. One piece of that chain goes down. So you don't want to do that. You just cheap as it seems.
You just want as few points of possible failure, right?
Exactly.
And that's what the Pearl can offer in that respect.
Yeah.
But I mean, let us know if this is something that you're encountering more of. If you're hearing about conferences or trade shows that you're attending coming up, getting canceled, or if people are coming up to you and asking, hey, do you know how you might be able to help me set up a live stream really quick, maybe in like a week or something? Because, of course, as the global health situation continues to progress, we're seeing this happen more and more with public gatherings sort of being, I mean, people are either pulling out or just straight up some trade shows are just being canceled.
Exactly.
So.
And as I mentioned earlier, you know, NAB as of today is still on. It's still planning to go forward. We are waiting to see what happens. Our plan is to still be there. But you know, that hopefully doesn't change, but could. I'm really hoping with warmer weather this all kind of works itself out a bit.
I mean, fingers crossed. We'll see how it comes. But that'll do it, I think, for this week. As we said, we are planning to be at NAB at South Upper Hall, SU 7922, which, you know,
hopefully we're there.
Fingers crossed.
Next week's episode is talking about redundancy in your live stream.
Ooh.
So maybe that's a good 2-parter to this. Making sure that you have some failover and some redundancy.
Absolutely.
The last thing you want is for it all to go wrong.
And it only goes wrong when you do not have the time to fix it.
Exactly. So, as always, thank you for joining us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, all the socially doodads and things.
Facebook, Twitter, Insta Talk, whatever.
We have no TikTok, if that's a thing. I don't know. The kids tell me. But yeah, join us next week. We'll have that topic. For this week, I think that's all. Throw any comments you have in there or send us a message. Love to hear from you. Thanks so much.